Are twins ever really identical? I mean, they may look alike, they even sound alike, but identical? Really? I mean, get to know them, get past what they have in common, and sometimes you find out they have a lot more in contrast. That even when they finish each other's sentences, the words may be the same, but they could be saying two very different things. It's amazing, really, twins. Actually, the Nintendo 64 had a set of twins just like that. The Zelda twins. I mean, they looked the same, they played about the same, they were even based on the same premise, the concept of time. I mean, they had everything in common, and nothing in common. There was the popular one, the cool kid, the one everyone loved, and there was his twin, the creepy kid who wore masks. You know, I've always said Ocarina of Time is the greatest game ever. I mean, there have since been better games, even better Zelda games, but for me, for its time, Ocarina of Time is the greatest game ever. I mean, that game blew minds in 1998, in a way most modern games can only pretend to. It was a revelation. But what was even cooler than Ocarina of Time is what Nintendo did next. I mean, to follow up Ocarina, all they had to do was make another Ocarina. People would have eaten it right up. That would have been the safe choice. Nintendo didn't make the safe choice. Instead, they chose to follow up one of their biggest, most successful games ever with their strangest and darkest and most complex game ever. That was Majora's Mask. And there was nothing safe about that choice. "15 years have since passed. Now we're looking at a remake, one that people begged for. There were petitions on the internet, people picketing in the streets. All right, not quite, but you get the point. A lot of people wanted this, an updated show of love for a game that went largely unloved when it was released. For me, one of the most interesting things about Majora's Mask 3D is that it's even here at all. I mean, this game, this decision, it wasn't exactly the most popular one. In fact, for years, it was the worst-selling 3D Zelda game ever. Still sold millions, but only a fraction of what Ocarina sold. It was a victim of both expectations and its own weirdness. A lot of people didn't get Majora's Mask. I guess it was so weird, it took 15 years. Of course, you can't really blame them. Majora's Mask, this is a weird game. And the weirdness starts right away, too. I mean, unlike every other Zelda game where there's a new Link who has to be told that he's a hero and that he's destined for greatness, this Link's already a hero, and his destiny's already been fulfilled. See, this isn't a sequel like most Zelda sequels, which take place hundreds of years later or in some alternate timeline. This one takes place right after Ocarina, so this is the same Link, only it's a changed Link. In Majora's Mask, he's leaving Hyrule. His work there is finished, but now that the swords have clashed and the shields have shattered, he's realizing that a hero's life is a lonely one. He leaves Hyrule not in search of adventures or battles, but an old friend. So the tone is set right away. Where Ocarina was heroic and triumphant, Majora's Mask is somber and emotional. And, as Link soon finds out, more unsettling than anything he's experienced before. So much for identical twins. But it's a testament to how great Majora's Mask is, that even though it uses the same engine and gameplay and characters as one of the biggest games ever, it still has an identity all its own. You know, speaking of the gameplay, it's functionally the same as Ocarina, like Z-targeting, the whole 9 rupees, the controls are the same. The difference is what you're doing with them. Much of this game's vibe and identity comes from the fact that it's largely a game of side quests. I mean, obviously there are dungeons, but there's only 4 of them. And there are bosses and treasure chests and all the things that make Zelda Zelda. But when you're finished with Majora's Mask, the thing you remember most are the people. Which sounds like a bad political ad, but it's true. You spend so much time meeting them and talking to them and helping them and learning about them. From the dreamers to the lovebirds to the whatever this guy is. And learning their habits and figuring out where they go and at what time and when you can change their sad fates. And then doing it. That's what makes Majora's Mask Majora's Mask. It's like Groundhog Day meets Zelda, with a dash of the apocalypse. You know, the crazy thing is, we've only scratched the surface of Majora's Mask, but I reviewed the original game about 4 years ago, so look, if you want to hear me talk about this game and all its wonderful complexities for almost 9 minutes, definitely check out that review. I can talk about Majora's Mask all day, but that's not why we're here. We're here today to talk about Majora's Mask 3D. So, what's changed? Well, not much, actually. In fact, it's a lot like Ocarina of Time's 3D remake. They didn't really change anything, as much as they just made a few improvements. And just subtle things mostly, like things most of us probably wouldn't even notice. That fairy that used to be over there is over here now. Now you can get that item from this guy, things like that. I mean, one of the knocks on Majora's Mask has always been that it's a bit too complex. So Majora's Mask 3D streamlines things a bit. And don't get me wrong, it's still very complex. But it's less confusing now, which is a good thing. There are two big changes though. The first, that you have more control over time in this version. Link can actually skip ahead to any hour that he wants, which means there's less standing around and just waiting for time to pass, which you had to do a lot in the original game. And second, and most notably, the presentation, which is fantastic. Majora's Mask has never looked better. And again, it's a similar effect as the Ocarina of Time remake, which basically just sharpened things up, improved some of the models, added some little details, but it's not a drastic overhaul, which shows you how pretty the original game was. And the music deserves mention too. I mean, Majora's Mask has some of the weirdest, creepiest music in the series. Again, it's a real shift from Ocarina of Time's heroic soundtrack. This one's really strange and almost off-key at times, and it just works perfectly for the mood of the game. You know, to be honest, I'm not really a fan of remakes. When you play a game like this, it's hard not to be a fan of remakes, especially for this game in particular. I mean, from the moment it was released 15 years ago, this game was destined to live in its twin's shadow, and its weirdness didn't help. Many people either overlooked or misunderstood Majora's Mask. 15 years later, they finally get it. And now it's better than ever, so those who never got it can try again. And those for whom the Nintendo 64 might as well be the Commodore 64, well, now they get to meet the other Zelda 64, the weird one. Its twin might have been the greatest Zelda, but this one has always been the coolest.